We are anonymous, your eyes and ears in the shadows, exposing the military truths governments hide. On the morning of October 28, 2025, the sea around the Caribbean turned from calm to electric. At exactly 4:37 a.m., 120 nautical miles southeast of Curaçao, the destroyer USS Jason Dunham DDG 109 was making its routine patrol through one of the world's busiest oil shipping corridors. The ocean surface seemed placid, but inside the Combat Information Center, the atmosphere crackled with tension. This Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, named for Medal of Honor, recipient Corporal Jason Dunham, is no ordinary vessel. She is equipped with the powerful Aegis combat system, Mk-41 vertical launch cells, the SSM missiles, Mk-45 5-inch gun, and layered radars that can track hundreds of targets. On this night, the crew believed their watch would pass quietly. They were wrong. Suddenly, the ship's spy, when a radar flared. A faint return, weak, fragmented low, flickered onto the screen. Not noise, not routine. The blip was moving fast, emerging from the north. At first glance, it resembled an F-16A Block 15, relics of the 1980s that still form part of the inventory of the Bolivarian military aviation of Venezuela. Reports confirmed 2 of those aging jets were accelerating directly toward the Jason Dunham at 540 knots at an altitude of about 4,000 feet, with range closing rapidly at 35 miles. A radio hail was sent. Silence in response. No communication from the approaching fighters. The bridge shifted into condition, 2 weapons-ready battle stations manned. Fingers moved across firing protocols. Within the bowels of the ship, the Phalanx CIWS began to spin. The crew knew this was no training exercise. It was a message delivered in the most dangerous way. At 4:49 a.m., radar tracked the 2 F-16S split formation, a classic Cold War tactic, resurrected one diving to 200 feet, the other climbing to 8,000 feet, forming a pincer. Petty Officer Lang reported, target separation confirmed, maintain lock. The combat director replied calmly. At 4:50 a.m., the lead Venezuelan pilot acted 2 AIM-9L Sidewinder missiles, vintage heat seekers designed in the early 1980s, fired toward the destroyer. Each missile cost around $56,000, but in the wrong hands, they could spark a billion-dollar crisis. The problem, those missiles lock onto jet exhaust, not the cold water turbines of a huge warship. As expected, they veered off within seconds, carving chaotic arcs across the sea, before slamming harmlessly into the waves. Seconds later, the Jason Dunham's Aegis system reacted. In 0.8 seconds after missile launch, detection tracking beams tightened. Within 4 seconds, the ESSM cells were hot. On the 5th second, the 6-barreled Phalanx CIWS block would be unleashed, a thunderous curtain of tungsten, 400-500 rounds per minute, tearing through air and salt spray. One F-16 broke hard, right its radar warning receiver screaming under strain. The other banked for a gun run. Its M61 20mm gun began to whine, but the destroyer did not fire. The rules of engagement still bound the captain's hand. The recorded log made clear, they fired once, hit twice. They'll get no third chance. At 4:55 a.m., the silence shattered once more. From the Combat Information Center, an encrypted order, weapons free, engage hostiles. In that instant, the Jason Dunham ceased being a patrol ship and became vengeance in motion. The Mk-41 VLS erupted with 4 RIM 174 Standard missile, 6 interceptors, each worth about $4.3 million, climbing at Mach 3.5 like molten spears through the Caribbean haze. Simultaneously, 2 FA-18E Super Hornet fighters were scrambled to join the fight. At 8,000 feet, the Venezuelan pilots saw the vapor trails too late. Their radar warning receivers flooded with red. They yanked on the stick, desperate to climb. Physics had already taken sides. The first SM-6 struck at 900 meters, a blossom of tungsten fragments, burning hotter than 200 degrees Fahrenheit, ripped through the right wing of one F-16. Hydraulics severed. The jet rolled into a death spiral, trailing black smoke across the dawn sky. The pilot reached for the ejection handle, but the system was 11 years overdue for maintenance. The bolts never fired. His final scream vanished beneath electronic static. The second F-16 fought back. Its ALQ-131 jamming pod, a Cold War artifact, spat out false signals trying to blind the ship's radar. But the Jason Dunham's SLQ-32V6 countered with surgical precision, feeding mirrored echoes back into the jet's systems. Power surge, system crash, total failure. Came the frantic cockpit voice. Seconds later, target 2 losing altitude. Confirm splash. The captain's voice recorded. At 4:55 a.m., both radar blips vanished. 2 pilots, $60 million in metal, and fuel erased in under 60 seconds. The ocean swallowed the wreckage. Only a streak of burning oil remained. On the bridge, the phalanx guns powered down. The air was saturated with cordite salt and intent. No cheers, no commentary. The quiet was not peace. It was the sound of judgment. Venezuela had thrown 2 relics at a superpower. The United States replied with supersonic fire and a verdict. The sea fell silent again, but it was a different kind of silence. The kind that follows operations executed with precision. By sunrise, the battle was done. At 5:30 a.m., across Caracas and Washington, D.C., the world awakened to new headlines. At 6:00 a.m., Venezuela's state media screamed, "The United States has violated our airspace and destroyed 2 fighter jets." Within minutes, President Nicolas Maduro appeared on television, fist raised, denouncing imperial aggression. Caracas filed an emergency appeal to the United Nations Security Council, demanding condemnation and reparations. At 6:31 a.m., the United States Department of Defense released radar logs, encrypted radio recordings, and thermal imagery from the AN Spy 1A aboard the Jason Dunham. The evidence was undeniable. Venezuelan jets had crossed 12.4 nautical miles into international airspace. They had fired 2 missiles first. The destroyer had retaliated only after detecting those launches. Every frame, every signal, every timestamp documented. The data hit global media like an explosion. In Washington, senior officials briefed Congress with cold, final tone. Within 4 hours, warships redeployed. The destroyers USS Gravely, DDG-107, and USS Porter, DDG-78, departed Norfolk to reinforce the region. The aircraft carrier USS George H.W. Bush CVN-77 redirected its Super Hornets to patrol the Caribbean corridor. Satellite coverage surged 3 Global Hawk drones, 1 P-8 Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft, all moved for round-the-clock surveillance. The message was crystal clear. The United States was prepared for escalation on its own terms. Global markets reacted instantly. Crude oil prices surged 7.8% overnight. Maritime insurers tripled premiums for vessels transiting the corridor. Analysts called it the most dangerous standoff in the Western Hemisphere since 1962. Inside the Situation Room, one U.S. admiral summed it. That wasn't an air battle. That was annihilation. By 8:00 a.m., at Roosevelt Roads Naval Station in Puerto Rico, dawn broke over the Caribbean, but the hue in the sky had changed. On the runway stood 2 F-35 Sea Lightning II jets, each $94 million worth of precision and deterrence. At 8:05, they roared out afterburners, screaming across the bay, a silent warning line drawn at the edge of Venezuelan airspace. At 25,000 feet, their radar signatures spelled the unsaid message, "We are watching." The Pentagon issued a statement, read by the Secretary of Defense. Any hostile action against U.S. forces will be met with an immediate, overwhelming, and decisive response. This wasn't a threat. It was a law of physics. By noon, the three destroyers, Jason Gravely and Porter, formed a 500-ton wall of steel, sweeping radar every 6 seconds, maintaining a defensive perimeter over 40 nautical miles. Above them, 3 E-2D Hawkeye early warning aircraft orbited in a perfect triangle. Their radars could track 2000 targets simultaneously. No one dared cross that line again. International reaction was swift. European allies voiced full support. Ministers of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries convened emergency talks amid fears that $180 billion worth of annual oil shipments could be disrupted. In Caracas, silence replaced the earlier outrage. Venezuela's remaining fleet of 14 operational F-16s were grounded indefinitely. The gamble had failed. As night fell over the Caribbean, the surface grew calm again. But it was a calm forged in order, not victory. Waves lapped gently against the gray hulls of the destroyers as if the sea itself acknowledged their authority. There were no victory parades, no speeches, just the quiet reaffirmation of dominance. America does not start wars, the final line of the Pentagon brief read, but America always ends them. And when the sun rose over the Atlantic, the reflection on those hulks told the world everything it needed to know. That deterrence, when forged in discipline, carries more power than any missile ever could. The Caribbean returned to stillness, the kind of quiet that only follows violence. Yet beneath those calm waves, consequences rippled far beyond sight. In less than 24 hours, a brief confrontation had rewritten the balance of power across the Western Hemisphere. 2 aircraft lost $60 million in wreckage, and 1 wounded nation forced to recognize its own limits. But the true cost was not measured in metal or fuel. It was measured in credibility. For Venezuela, this became a cautionary tale, a moment when pride collided with reality. It had gambled on defiance, believing proximity could substitute for power. It learned that distance means nothing to precision, that in modern warfare, arrogance burns faster than fuel. For the United States, it was never about conquest. The Jason Dunham had not sought glory. The sailors who stood at their stations didn't cheer when the threat fell. They logged the time, sealed the report, and prepared for the next watch. Their discipline was the difference between chaos and order, between a skirmish and a war. By the end of the week, the world's headlines had shifted elsewhere. The rest of the story faded from front pages, but in military circles, the engagement became textbook, a lesson in escalation control, a show of force, a single destroyer with restraint and precision stopping a regional crisis before it broke wide open. The ocean still holds its secrets. But one truth lingered above the waterline. Power is not proven by who strikes first, but by who stands unshaken after the smoke clears. The sea remembers, and so does America. Now the question is yours. Was this a battle of strength or a lesson in restraint? Tell us what you think in the comments below, because the next storm at sea may decide more than ships. It may decide history itself.